Hello, everyone. My name is Casey. I'm a client service specialist here at Design Manager, and I'll be hosting the demonstration. If you have any questions during the demo, feel free to enter them in the question pane on your GoToWebinar panel. Any questions outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email to support@designmanager.com. For today's webinar, we're going to be taking a look at Design Manager's automated item status codes. Design Manager Pro has a powerful, adaptable system of status codes that indicate how far an item has progressed in the design process. The status of an item is automatically updated as various activities occur. This allows you to see how your projects and items are progressing with a simple glance, while automation gives you one less thing to worry about. So let's get started with how the status codes work and how they can be customized to mirror your company's workflow. Design Manager Pro comes with a default set of status codes, so you can start using them right away without any setup. These status codes can be found under the Item Status tab in the Company Information and Settings. So we'll explore this window in greater detail shortly, but the status code grid here gives us a good overview of how the status codes reflect that progression. So each status has a name and priority associated with it. The priority here determines the order or the hierarchy. As we see here, specifying is the first status, indicated by the lowest priority, followed by awaiting client approval, need to order, etc. High priority statuses such as inactive and critical override all of those lower priority status codes. So in general, Design Manager looks at the status codes starting at the highest priority. So does the item satisfy the inactive code? If not, the critical code, and progresses all the way until the item satisfies, let's say, the ordered code. To summarize, the status for the item will be set to the status code with the highest priority that is satisfied by the item. So now let's take a look at these default codes in action, and then we'll explore how we can customize the status code list. So let's go ahead and add an item to our project. To do so, I'm just going to jump to my whiteboard, and then I'm going to add this sconce off to our coastal cottage project. Okay, I will now jump into our specification window, popping in that project name. So our specification window is the most common area to review the status codes as it has this conveniently located status column here. So here we'll find that item that I just sent to our project specifying. So if we quickly grab that item status window, jumping back into File, Company Information and Settings, we can see that an item is set to specifying when a new item is created. So back into our specs, we can also find that status code throughout the software in places like the top right-hand corner of the actual item window here. So now we can move through our design process as normal to see those codes changing. So I'm going to go ahead and make a proposal for our sconce. Type in the project name, selecting add. And I'm just going to call this sconce so we know what we're looking at here. Tagging it on the left to add it to the document and selecting OK to generate that proposal. Okay, so you'll notice that right on the here that we can see the status of the items on those documents. And then jumping back into our specifications, let me clear out and refresh. We'll notice that that status has now switched to awaiting client approval. And if we take a look back at the item status window, we can see why, and it's because that set when is when a proposal is issued. So Design Manager recognizes that we created that proposal and it updated the status accordingly. So next we're going to add a cash receipt to reflect the deposit that in theory we received for that proposal. To do so, I'm just going to jump over to our accounting tab, cash receipts, and select to add, typing in our project code and tagging our item. I'll go ahead and post that. Okay, so we received payment, and now we can get back into our specifications. And we will see here that the status now reads need to order. So back into our file, company information and settings, item status window, we can see that need to order is set when deposit is received from the client. So if we were to generate a purchase order now, that status would be moved to ordered. When the vendor invoice is posted, that status would read needs to be invoiced, and so on and so forth. So as we just discussed, that status is automatically set when the activity described in the set when field occurs. However, some situations may call for the status to be set manually, and we can do so in a few different ways. So first, right on the specification window here, we can right-click on that status code column, and that will display a list of the status codes. And from here, you can just choose the desired status. So maybe this item was actually purchased and picked up from the showroom, so there's no need for a purchase order. And in that case, we can just move the status directly to need to invoice. So we can also change the status from the item status window itself. So I'm going to pull that open and then jump to our status tab. So say that we didn't want to set the status to need to invoice and instead we want to return it to need to order. We can do so there. And lastly, we can set the status for the items on the entire proposal. So getting back to our proposal window, let me actually jump in. All we have to do here is right click, select from that list, or we can select the status button. And again, we have that option here. So these default status codes, they work well for most designers. However, you may want to customize the wording, the colors, the process, or even the add or remove statuses entirely. And all of this can be easily done under that item status tab in the company information and settings. So we're going to head back there. And to do so, all you have to do is highlight a status. So in this case, we are checking out that specifying status, and then click the pencil icon to edit. So here we can review all of the features available. So we have the name, we have that priority or the order in the design process. We have the color, which is completely customizable, as well as the text color can be switched around. So all of that top section area is where you can change the actual title and the look. And then the middle section here is where we can determine whether you want status to be marked like the overall status of the item. So it can be active, it can be marked completed. That would mean the item has moved through the design process. And we want to archive it to keep the active list manageable. So completed items won't show on the proposal, PO, or invoice windows, along with any specific reports like pre-billing. You can also select inactive here, meaning the item has been rejected, but we may want to refer to that in the future. So these items won't show on the proposal, PO, or invoice windows or any reports unless specified. And then the bottom of the section of the window here is where you can edit what automatically or manually triggers the status to be assigned to an item. So there are lots of combinations between the drop-down menus and the checkboxes in order for the software to handle all types of design processes and procedures. So if I use the drop-down menu here, we can see we first have a new item is created. So in other words, we've added that item to our project specifications. The next one down here is new item from inventory. So if the item was in our stock, and I can jump into our specs to check that out. if we just use that inventory button along the bottom here, that would trigger that one. Further down, we have our acknowledged. If we were to head to our purchase order window and pull up our receive status. So this is where you do all your tracking. So if you had an acknowledgement date or number, that would satisfy the PO acknowledgement condition. So you'll also notice that we have a no or a not version of each value. So this is just a really quick overview. For a full list and explanation of each of these values, selecting the question mark icon on the item status screen here will bring you to our manual. And here you can review those at any time. All right, so further down here, we have our and or functions, and that allows us to have multiple conditions for a single status. So for example, ordered for a firm that has large inventory where items are often committed to projects might be adjusted so the conditions are when a PO is issued or when the item is from inventory. So if either condition is satisfied, that status would be selected. And then looking at an example, completed here, by default is defined as the item is invoiced to the client and the vendor invoice is posted. So we may want to change that to the item or the invoice is fully paid by the client and the vendor invoice is posted. So that's what makes this fund so versatile. You can customize these codes to your firm's work and specialized business practices. All right, so below that and or, we do have 4 additional settings. Here we can find our locked option, and this will prevent Design Manager from automatically updating the status of the item, leaving it fixed at the locked status code. So a user needs to manually progress it forward from that status. So in this case, a status code will label it designer approval. That priority might be 15, putting it between our specifying and our awaiting status codes. You can go ahead and set a color here. I'll change that text as well. And then we'll select to, let's see here, where are we at? We'll go ahead and lock it. So locking this status would ensure that no matter what activity happened with the item, the status would still read designer approval until it was manually changed by a senior staff member, for example. Okay, actually, I'm going to jump down to our critical code here. So the password protect option is the next one in this list. And you'll see that for this critical code, I do have that set. This prevents users that don't have the allow lock status change option unlocked in their permissions from changing that item status. So let's take a look at what that means. On our user and security tab here, let's select to edit my permissions, and we'll expand on project, view access, specifications, view access. And here we'll see that I do not have permission to allow locked status change. This is also where you'll find the permission to allow locked edits. So back on our specification window, jumping into specs, we see that this armchair here has the critical status set. So if I attempted to change that, let's say I wanted to move it to completed, you'll see that my access is denied. Okay, so back on our item status window, moving down the list there, the lock purchasing option prevents an item from being able to be included on a purchase order. So another option that would be useful when a senior staff member or expediter is charged with reviewing the specifications prior to purchasing. An example here might be a code titled pre-order review. and that would be set when the deposit was received by the client. The lock edits option allows us to prevent any edit to the item after moving the status without having the allow locked edits permission unlocked in those user and security settings that we just reviewed. So lock edits is helpful if your company follows a strict contract system where only a senior staff member can change the specifications once that contract has been accepted by the client. So that is all of our settings there. All of your firm's status codes and values can be reviewed at any time by running the status code report. So if I pull up our project reports and expand on our glossary listing folder, this is where you can find that report. I also have it over in my favorites for convenience. So if you run that, you'll get a great overview of all of your firm's codes as well as what actually triggers them. So to conclude, the status code system in Design Manager is flexible and robust. It has automatic or manual triggers that can be completely tailored to your design flow. And most importantly, the status codes save time, create structure, and provide clarity to your everyday work life. Thank you for joining the discussion today. Take care, stay safe, and have a great day.